Now for the next 2, 3, 4 videos, let's turn our attention to triggers. And so in this video using triggers, I just want to kind of remind you, we talked about triggers in a video called Understanding Triggers way back kind of in the quick review section of the course when we first started. And back then I told you a trigger is really nothing more than a stored procedure that will automatically execute whenever an update, insert, or delete query gets executed on a table. Meaning, of course, that we've created a trigger to take action when one of those executions takes place. And to give you a graphic of this, if I've got a table and I have created an insert trigger on that table, and then an insert happens, that table then takes the insert, fires the insert trigger, and then the insert trigger runs whatever code is in it, and that is the essence of what triggering is all about. Now, triggers are very powerful and they're extremely useful when, for example, you need to verify, modify, validate, or control data modifications as they occur. Maybe you need to enforce business rules when data is modified. Let's say someone wants to change somebody's name or address, and we want to verify with that person that they're the ones that did instantiate that change. Maybe someone wants to change a credit limit. And before we do that, we want to go check and see what kind of customer they've been in the past, that sort of thing. You may need to extend the integrity checking logic of constraints and rules and so forth. Constraints and rules tend to work on that individual table. We may want to spread that out to look at data in other tables and determine what exactly we want to put in this particular table. I can automate specific processing. For example, when the reorder point in the stock level column reaches a certain threshold, I can kick off code to reorder that particular product. I can generate an email and send it out based on data values. If you can imagine it, you can pretty much do it with triggers. And so anytime you find yourself backed into a corner and you're thinking to yourself, now when this data goes in, I need to check it for this and this and this, but a constraint's not going to do it, a rule's not going to do it, trigger is the answer. There's two types of triggers available that you can use. The first one is called an after trigger. And when you build your trigger, if you don't mention the type of trigger, you're getting an after trigger. It is the default trigger type. And with an after trigger, the trigger itself is fired after all the statements that triggered the trigger have executed successfully. Now, there's a way to say that simpler in English, and that is the trigger does not fire until after data modifications have been made to the table. So your trigger never gets a chance to look at the data until after it's gone into your table. So if you don't like it there, you'll have to have part of your trigger delete that data back out. Now, an instead of trigger is a trigger that the trigger is fired instead of the triggering SQL statement. That's a little bit confusing. I've got this insert statement coming in. I've got an instead of trigger on the table. So as soon as the insert comes into the table, it kicks off the trigger, and the trigger says, wait a minute, don't put that in there. Let me look at it. And so then we can start to look. This trigger fires before data modifications have been made to the table. Now, triggers are created using the create trigger command, and they are deleted using the drop trigger command. Now, watch these next two. These have historically been like trick questions on the exam. A trigger can be disabled on a table. You can use the disable trigger or the alter table command, either one. But watch for that alter table. If you go out and look in the syntax of alter table, you will see it about halfway down there. You can disable the trigger. This will disable a trigger that's active on a table. It will still exist in the database, but it will not fire when data modifications come in. A trigger can also be enabled on a table using enable trigger or, once again, the alter table command. So just be aware of that. Make sure you're comfortable with everything you see on this page right here about creating and dropping triggers, about how to disable them and enable them. Know that you can. Know that you can use the disable or enable command, or you can use alter table to do it. And that's kind of the basic information on triggers. Let's go out and talk about one really, really neat aspect of triggers in the next 2 or 3 videos, and that's inserted and deleted tables, taking a look at some examples, and those sorts of things. So let's keep going and dig a little deeper into triggers.